Hello everyone, and welcome. Welcome to a moment of peace. A moment for yourself. Find a comfortable position. Perhaps settle into your favorite chair. Let your shoulders relax, and just breathe. In and out. Today, we have a story. A simple story from a small village about a young boy. On the surface, it might seem like a story about laziness. But if we listen closely, we will discover it's truly a story about a different kind of intelligence. A different way of seeing the world. We'll journey with this boy, and along the path, we'll gently practice some English. We'll learn new words, and see how they fit into sentences, like pieces of a peaceful puzzle. There is no pressure here, only calm. Let the words wash over you. If you learn something, wonderful. If you simply relax and drift away, that is wonderful too. So let's begin. Let's travel together, once upon a time. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village nestled between rolling green hills, there lived a young boy named Andy. He lived with his mother and father in a small, comfortable house right on the edge of town. The house was painted a fading but cheerful blue, and from its windows, you could see the entirety of their life's work, a vast field of rice, shimmering like a golden sea under the sun. Now, if you were to ask the villagers about Andy, they would often use one word to describe him: lazy. It's a word we all know, isn't it? Lazy. It means unwilling to work or use energy. A lazy person might prefer to rest, to relax, to avoid difficult tasks. And it was true that Andy had a deep, deep appreciation for rest. His daily chore, his one job, was to help his father in the fields by chasing away the birds that came to eat their precious rice crops. It was an important job. The family's livelihood depended on that harvest. Most of the other boys in the village would run through the fields, whooping and waving sticks. Whoosh! Whoosh! They would use slingshots, sending small stones whistling through the air to scare the birds away. It was a job of constant motion, of energy, of sweat. But Andy would watch them and sigh a very deep sigh. To him, all that running seemed inefficient. Why expend all that energy when the goal was simply to create a disturbance? To make a noise? So, one afternoon, instead of running, he sat under the shade of a large, friendly oak tree at the edge of the field. He took out a small notebook and a piece of charcoal, and he began to think. He began to design. Over the next few days, he gathered materials. Old wooden poles from the shed. Rope that was frayed but still strong. He didn't rush. He worked slowly, methodically. He placed the poles strategically in different corners of the field. He connected them with a complex web of ropes, all leading back to his favorite spot under the oak tree. When he was finished, he had created a magnificent system, a network of pulleys and strings. From his comfortable seat, leaning against the rough bark of the tree, he could simply tug on one primary rope, and all across the field, the other ropes would jiggle and dance. Tied to them were pieces of old cloth, strips of metal that caught the light. They fluttered and flashed and created a marvelous commotion. The birds, startled by the sudden movement, would take flight in a cloud of feathers and surprised chirps. Andy could protect the entire field without ever standing up. He could lie back on the grass, look up at the slow-moving clouds, and listen to the world, simply giving a gentle tug on the rope every now and then. He found immense satisfaction in this system. It was clever. It was effective. His father, a kind man with hands worn rough from a lifetime of labor, would watch him from the porch. He would see the birds scatter and see Andy, seemingly asleep in the shade. A small frown of worry would crease his forehead. He loved his son deeply, but he worried about his Chara. He thought to himself in a quiet, concerned voice, "If I get sick, how will Andy take care of everything? How will he manage the hard, physical work that life so often demands?" This is a wonderful phrase to practice. How will he manage? To manage something means to handle it, to cope with it, to be in control of a situation. We might say, I have a lot of work, but I will manage to finish it. Or, can you manage that heavy box by yourself? But since Andy always finished his work, the fields were perfectly protected. His father never got angry. He would just shake his head with a faint smile, muttering about his clever but lazy boy. Then, one summer, the rains did not come. It was a dry season. The word dry means without water, without moisture. The air feels dry. The ground becomes dry. The earth cracks under the relentless sun. And during this difficult time, Andy's father, he got sick. It wasn't a small cold. He became very ill. He was weak, feverish, and confined to his bed. The burden of the farm, the immense responsibility, fell onto Andy's young shoulders. And he tried. He truly did. He woke up before the sun, his body aching with a new kind of tiredness. The work was brutal. It involved drawing water from the well, a deep, dark hole in the ground with a heavy bucket on a creaking rope. He would haul bucket after bucket, carrying them to the parched fields, his muscles screaming in protest. He wasn't used to this hard work. Hard work means labor that requires a lot of physical or mental effort. But it was a losing battle. One boy could not do the work of a man, especially not during a drought. A drought is a long period of abnormally low rainfall, leading to a shortage of water. It's a very serious word for farmers. Day by day, Andy watched the life fade from the crops. The vibrant green stalks turned a brittle brown. They began to wilt, to droop, to die. He couldn't save them. He couldn't carry enough water. He felt a terrible feeling growing in his chest. It was a feeling of disappointment. Disappointment is a sadness you feel when your hopes or expectations are not met. He was disappointed in himself. He felt useless. Useless means not able to do anything productive or helpful. One evening, after another long, scorching day, the weight of it all became too heavy. The crops were almost certainly lost. He sat outside on the steps of the porch, under a blanket of a million glittering stars. The night air was cool now, but it offered no comfort. He looked up at the vast, infinite sky and felt very, very small. A single tear traced a clean path through the dust on his cheek. He thought, his mind whispering the words in the quiet night. Why didn't I ever try harder? Why did I always look for the easiest way? Now my family's hope is gone. I have failed them. It was a moment of profound sadness, a moment of regret, but also, though he didn't know it yet, a moment of beginning. Sometimes, our lowest points are the foundations upon which we build our greatest strengths. The next morning, a strange sound pulled Andy from his sleep. It was the sound of excitement, of chatter. Something was happening in the village square. With a heavy heart, he walked towards the noise. In the center of the square, a soldier stood tall. His uniform was a splash of brilliant red and gold against the dusty brown buildings. He held a scroll of parchment and was reading from it in a loud, clear voice that carried across the crowd. Hear ye, he announced. That's an old-fashioned way to say, listen everyone! By order of the king, a grand competition shall be held at the palace. A test of strength and skill. The winner... The soldier paused for effect, his eyes scanning the eager faces. The winner shall be rewarded with a chest of gold. A fortune! A gasp went through the crowd. A chest of gold. It was more money than any of them could imagine in their lifetimes. It could save a family. It could change a destiny. Andy's mind, which had been so slow and heavy, suddenly began to race. It was like a key turning in a lock. Click. The thoughts started to flow, fast and clear. This could be the answer. This could save my family. I may not be strong, but perhaps there is another way. Without thinking, without letting his fear and doubt catch up to him, he found himself stepping forward. His voice, usually so quiet, came out stronger than he expected. "I will join," he said. "I will enter the competition." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a few people chuckled. Then, the laughter grew. It wasn't mean laughter, but it was full of disbelief. How could Andy, the laziest boy in the village, possibly win a contest of strength and skill against the strongest men in the kingdom? They imagined him napping at the starting line. Andy heard the laughter, but he let it wash over him. It didn't touch him. He had a purpose now. A purpose is a reason for doing something, a feeling of determination. His purpose was his family's survival. His parents, when he told them, were worried. They knew the challenges would be physical, but they also saw a new light in their son's eyes. A determination they had never seen before. They hoped, more than anything, that this journey would teach him the value of effort. They hoped it would motivate him. To motivate someone means to provide them with a reason for doing something. His love for his family was his motivation. So, with a small bag of food and a water skin, Andy set off early the next morning. The journey to the palace took 3 days. He walked along dusty roads, through quiet forests where the sunlight dappled through the leaves, and slept under the great, starry sky. He had time to think, to plan, to wonder. After 3 days of travel, the king's palace appeared on the horizon. It was magnificent, with towers that seemed to scratch the sky and banners fluttering in the wind. But Andy didn't go to the palace gates first. All the contestants were directed to the shore of a vast, beautiful lake. Its water was blue and clear, reflecting the perfect clouds above. Andy's heart sank. The other participants were enormous. They were soldiers, blacksmiths, farmers from the northern hills, all with muscles like ropes and confident smiles. They were stretching, jumping up and down, splashing water on their faces. Andy felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. How can I beat these people? He thought. I am not strong like them. This was a mistake. An official walked to the front of the group and explained the rules of the first challenge. His voice echoed across the water. Contestants, your first test is simple. You must cross this lake. The first 3 people to reach the far shore will qualify for the final round. Take your positions. This was it. A swimming race. Andy's worst nightmare. He was an okay swimmer, but he could never match the power and speed of these athletes. The countdown began. 3. The strong men tensed, leaning forward. 2. Andy's mind was blank with panic. 1. Go! With a tremendous splash, everyone leaped into the water and began swimming with powerful, frantic strokes. The water churned white with their effort. Everyone, except Andy. He stood frozen on the shore for a moment, watching them pull away. The crowd cheered for the leaders, and a few people pointed and laughed at the boy who was just standing there. But Andy wasn't just standing. He was observing. His initial panic had cooled into a calm, focused analysis. The official had said, "You must cross the lake." He had not said, "You must swim across the lake." It was a race to cross, not specifically a swimming race. This was a crucial distinction. A distinction is a difference between 2 similar things. Understanding this distinction was the key. He looked at the frantic swimmers. Already, some of the bigger, more muscular men were starting to tire. Swimming was about endurance as much as strength. Suddenly, Andy turned his back on the lake. He ran, not into the water, but into the nearby forest that lined the shore. The crowd was utterly confused. Was he giving up? In the forest, his eyes scanned the ground. He wasn't looking for a way out. He was looking for solutions. He saw them. Broken branches from a recent storm. An old, discarded roll of twine in a hollow log left by some long ago fisherman. His hands moved quickly, but smoothly. No frantic energy. He selected a few strong, straight branches. He used the twine to lash them together. He wasn't building a perfect boat. He was building a serviceable raft. A raft is a simple, flat structure, often made of wood, used for floating on water. He found a wider, flatter piece of wood to use as a paddle. Within 10 minutes, he had a small, floating platform. He dragged it to the water's edge and pushed off. While the strongest swimmers were still in the lead, the middle of the pack was already struggling, their arms burning with fatigue. Fatigue is a feeling of extreme tiredness or exhaustion. Andy, on his raft, began to paddle. His motion was steady, rhythmic, and efficient. He didn't splash. He didn't waste energy. He used the muscles in his back and core, not just his arms. He moved slowly. But he moved constantly. He passed one tired swimmer, then another. They watched him, stunned, as he glided by on his makeshift raft. He was being smart. He was being resourceful. Resourceful is a fantastic word. It means having the ability to find quick and clever ways to overcome difficulties. Andy was using his resources, the branches, the twine, his mind, to solve the problem in a unique way. In the end, the two fastest swimmers finished first and second. But right behind them, paddling his raft calmly onto the shore, was Andy. He finished third. He had qualified. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were cheering, amazed by his cleverness. The next day, the final competition was held. The courtyard of the palace was packed with people. Even the king himself sat on his balcony, looking down with curiosity. The two other finalists looked at Andy with a new respect, but also with a fierce competitive fire. They were still confident in their strength. In the center of the courtyard were 3 enormous wooden blocks. They were huge, heavy, and solid. The king's advisor stepped forward to explain the final task. "Your final challenge is one of pure strength and determination," he boomed. "You must push your wooden block 1 kilometer down the royal road to the finish line. However, you are not alone." He gestured to a long table behind the blocks. On it was a collection of tools. "You may choose one tool, only one, to assist you in this task. Choose wisely. You have 1 minute." The first contestant, a giant of a man, laughed. He strode immediately to the table and grabbed the thickest, strongest rope he could find. His plan was simple. He would tie the rope to the block and use his immense strength to pull it, like a draft horse. He tied it quickly and began to strain. The block shuddered and began to move, inch by grinding inch. The second contestant, a clever-looking soldier, chose a long, strong piece of wood, a lever. He jammed it under the edge of his block and began to pry it up and forward, using the principles of physics to gain an advantage. It was hard work, but his block, too, began to move in a slow, lurching fashion. All eyes turned to Andy. What would he choose? A bigger lever? A stronger rope? Andy walked to the table slowly. He looked at every tool. He picked up a heavy hammer and put it down. He considered a saw. He ran his fingers over the ropes. The crowd watched, breathless. The other 2 men were already making progress. Then his hand settled on a tool. It was a small, simple knife. The crowd gasped. A knife? How could a small knife possibly help him move a block that weighed 10 times what he did? People began to murmur. Perhaps his success in the first round was just luck. Perhaps he had given up. But Andy had not given up. He was thinking on a completely different level, while the other men saw the challenge as, "How can I apply my strength to move this object?" Andy saw it as, "How can I change the object itself to make it easier to move?" He walked to his block. He did not try to push it. Instead, he got down on his knees and began to use the knife. He started to carve. He wasn't carving a design. He was sculpting. He was changing the very shape of the problem. The crowd watched, first in confusion, then in growing fascination. The sound of the knife scraping against the hardwood was the only sound in the silent courtyard. Scrape, scrape, scratch. The other contestants grunted and heaved, sweating under the sun, moving their blocks a few feet at a time. Andy worked steadily. He shaved off the sharp, stubborn corners. He began to curve the sides. After nearly an hour of focused, calm work, his block was no longer a block. It was transforming. It was becoming round. He had carved himself a large, sturdy wooden wheel. A sphere. He stood up, wiped the sweat from his brow, placed his hands on the now curved surface, and gave a push. It rocked. Then it rolled. Just a little at first, then more easily. The crowd gasped as one. The determination on Andy's face was clear. Determination is a firmness of purpose, a quality that makes you continue trying to do something even when it is difficult. He began to walk, then jog, then run beside his creation. He was no longer pushing a dead weight. He was guiding a rolling object. The laws of physics were now on his side. He flew past the second contestant, who was still laboriously levering his block forward. He caught up to and passed the first man, whose muscles were bulging, his face red with the strain of pulling his immense load. With a final, easy push, Andy's wooden sphere rolled across the finish line. He was the first to finish. He had won. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the entire courtyard erupted in the loudest cheers anyone had ever heard. They weren't just cheering for a winner. They were cheering for intelligence, for creativity. The king himself stood up and applauded. The lazy boy had won the king's contest. Andy was awarded the chest of gold. It was heavy and beautiful, but the weight he felt lifting from his heart was infinitely greater. He had done it. He had saved his family's farm. He had proven his worth, not through brute force, but through the power of his mind. He returned home a hero. But more importantly, he returned home changed. The experience had given him a powerful reason to work hard. His love for his parents was his motivation. He still preferred clever solutions. He designed a new system to bring water from the well to the fields, so they would never suffer in a drought again. But he now understood the value of effort and determination. He had found a balance. This story shows us something important. It shows us that sometimes, what we call laziness, can actually be a search for efficiency, a desire to find a better, smarter way. But to achieve something truly great, we need more than just intelligence. We need a powerful reason, a strong motivation. For Andy, it was his family. For you, it might be your dreams. It might be the desire to create a better life. It might be to prove to yourself that you can do something difficult. Finding your why is the most important step. A big goal can motivate you to give your best, even when it's hard. And now, as we slowly come to the end of our story, let's gently review some of the words we encountered today. Let them float in your mind. Don't try to memorize them forcefully. Just listen.